Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about a new, exciting rumor for Nintendo Switch 2. This rumor is more like a triple-pronged rumor, because there's little bits of it that come from 3 different places, some of which many of you may think are very credible, perhaps all of which you may think are very credible, depending on your own personal opinion here. But basically, what's being suggested is that there are some games in development for Nintendo Switch 2 that would be very exciting for us Nintendo fans, perhaps us longtime Nintendo fans, and this has me extremely excited for what may be to come, so that's what we're diving into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches on June 5th, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So the first of this triple-pronged rumor is coming from, yes, again, Nash Weedle, who we, yes, have been talking about a lot lately, but they've also gotten a lot of things correct lately. Just a brief reminder, they leaked Assassin's Creed Shadows for Nintendo Switch 2, before other people were talking about the possibility. They also leaked a special edition of Elden Ring for Nintendo Switch 2, before other people were talking about the possibility. They talked about how 3D Donkey Kong might be in the Switch 2 Direct, but 3D Mario might not be, and that was totally true. We have Donkey Kong Bonanza and no 3D Mario. They also hinted at Metroid Prime 4 having a new play control-like style for Switch 2. And what do we have? We have the Switch 2 edition with the mouse controls for Metroid Prime 4. These are all recent leaks that have all proven to be true. We go further back, they leaked Mario & Luigi Brothership last year. They are most known for Metroid Dread a few years back. They have gotten some things wrong as well in the past, but lately, they've been getting a lot more things correct, and I haven't noticed anything wrong as of late. So yes, I'm paying attention to what they're saying here. And what they're saying here is bombazo. Microsoft ya no piensa solo en Xbox. Aunque no serán exclusivos de Switch 2, planean lanzamientos de juegos orientados al usuario de Nintendo. En estos momentos hay un juego en desarrollo, un juego en preproducción. Parece que Craig Duncan tiene que ver con esto. So basically, what's going on here? Here, Nashville is calling it a bombshell. You already have the translation here, but basically, Microsoft doesn't only think about Xbox anymore, which we already know. We've seen that. They've been putting out games on PlayStation, they've been putting out games on Nintendo for years at this point, and they continue to do so. We've seen Nintendo and Microsoft work really well together. We have different rare games, which Microsoft now owns, coming to Nintendo Switch Online. We even had Minecraft Steve and Banjo-Kazooie added to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and we know that more games are on the way to Nintendo Switch 2. But here Nash Weedle is saying that while Microsoft won't be releasing any exclusive games to Nintendo, they are working on some games that are targeted for Nintendo users. One of them is a game already in development, another game is in pre-production. So what could these games be that would be targeted towards Nintendo users? Well, I'll tell you what it probably isn't, and that's Call of Duty. So here, further down this thread, Ali Garcia asked Nash Weedle, Nash, ¿cuándo piensa que anunciarán el COD en Switch 2? Basically, when are they going to announce Call of Duty for Switch 2? Nash Weedle says, en junio, in June. And this I wouldn't even really consider much of a leak because, well, we already know that Microsoft absolutely has to bring Call of Duty to Switch 2. Microsoft and Nintendo have entered a legally binding contractual agreement to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo platforms for the next 10 years. Maybe you could argue that when Nash here says in June, it's a leak that it'll be announced in June, probably for a big Switch 2 Direct, because we are expecting a Direct in June as Nintendo normally has, probably a little bit after Summer Games Fest, which we've already been talking about. Seems really likely. Even if Nintendo doesn't have a big Direct in June, it would probably be in early July. So this isn't too crazy. Call of Duty probably almost certainly needs to come out this year for Switch 2, so I would expect it to be announced in the next big Direct. But Call of Duty isn't something that would be in the works being targeted towards Nintendo users. What is being referenced here is something totally different in my opinion. So what could those be? Well, let's now talk about the second prong to this crazy exciting rumor. And this one goes a little while back. On Reset Era, about a year and a half ago, apparently, Nate Drake, also known as Nate the Hate, who also has gotten some interesting leaks correct as of late, such as the reveal for the Switch 2 on January 16th, which just so happened to be the same day as the release for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, which left many people doubting that it would happen, but sure enough, it did happen. And then also, many people doubted this other rumor provided by Nate the Hate or Nate Drake that Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered would be coming out in April, announced and coming out the same month, and that was also totally true. Shall dropped in April. So Nate the Hate's also someone who gets things correct. Of course, also they've gotten some things wrong in the past. Take all of this with a grain of salt. Nothing here is totally guaranteed, but it seems like they are fairly credible. And what they did say a while back on Reset Era was this. Biosnake had asked, "Whatever happened to that Banjo game? Cancelled, I'm guessing?" Nate responds, "Remains an active project, but the project was only greenlit early last year. Much has to be done and development can change a ton. Ideas abandoned, internal reboots, etc." So he said this December 26, 2023. So if it was greenlit only early last year, that would mean early 2022. Which would mean this project has been in the works for a little bit over 3 years at this point. So it looks like we have two rumors here that are aligning. It seems like Microsoft might truly be going back to Banjo-Kazooie, and with their strong relationship with the Nintendo now, and how we've seen different Nintendo-centric things succeed on Switch 2, a Banjo-Kazooie project that comes out for both Xbox and Switch 2 day and date at the same time might prove to be very, very successful. Really, this is one of the few things that would make sense that Microsoft could be working on that would make sense to target towards Nintendo users. A brand new Banjo-Kazooie game. So if I had to make a prediction, this is what I think Nash Weedle is referring to here. But what about that other game in pre-production? What might that be? Let's now get into the third prong to this crazy, exciting rumor. So on Twitter, on March 30th, Old School 3D Renders put out this really cool old school render for Diddy Kong Racing. And here, Slam Jam Championship Wrestling, still on March 30th, said, "Love this game, still wants a sequel. Who doesn't?" However, a day later, before the big Switch 2 reveal, I might add, Donkey Kong's creator, the 1994 version Donkey Kong Country, the modern version of Donkey Kong, Kev Bayless, who currently works at Playtonic Games, but worked on Donkey Kong Country, Diddy Kong, Killer Instinct, Battletoads, Star Fox Adventures, and more, because he used to work for Rare. He responded to Slam Jam talking about wanting a sequel and put a winking emoji. So is Kev Bayless suggesting that something like a Diddy Kong Racing is in the works? Well, stick with me here. I pointed out that Kev Bayless said this before the big Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd. And on April 2nd, we got that Direct, and as the closer of the show, what did Nintendo reveal? Donkey Kong Bonanza. And might I add, Kev Bayless has actually been showing a lot of love for the new design of Donkey Kong. He's very excited about Donkey Kong coming back to prominence. He thinks this is amazing, even though he's responsible for the prior design of Donkey Kong from the original Donkey Kong Country. But this person also had a hand in Diddy Kong, and maybe if there is something like a Diddy Kong Racing in the works, he would be putting out this winking emoji when we start talking about a sequel. And when we also consider that there is one game that it seems like Microsoft is working on targeted towards Nintendo users in Banjo-Kazooie, could there be another in pre-production that might be something somewhat similar but not entirely the same, like maybe a Diddy Kong Racing? Well, it might make some sense, but Diddy Kong Racing would not be made by Microsoft because Diddy Kong is still a Nintendo character. So Microsoft is not going to be working on a Diddy Kong Racing. So it's possible that Kev Bayless is referring to an entirely different project here. And given that he now works at Playtonic Games, they could be simply working on a Playtonic's game of Yooka-Laylee that's a kart racer. Or maybe like somewhat of a spiritual successor to Diddy Kong Racing. That's a possibility, which would also be fun and cool, but not quite the same thing. But here's another possibility. And this is me admittedly making some stretching leaps here. But what if Microsoft and Playtonic Games and Nintendo are kind of working together here on something? They're all coming together because Microsoft does technically own Rare, and then those who run Playtonic Games used to be a part of Rare way back when, and then of course Nintendo owns some of these important characters like Diddy Kong, for example. What if they're all coming together here to put together a Diddy Kong Racing? It's a collaborative effort. That's a possibility. Maybe it's a small one, because admittedly, again, it could be a bit of a stretch, but is it impossible? I don't think it's impossible. Microsoft did allow Rare to work on Diddy Kong Racing DS, which was published by Nintendo for the Nintendo DS. So a collaboration like this has actually some precedent. And maybe it wouldn't even be called Diddy Kong Racing. Maybe it would be Banjo-Kazooie Racing. Maybe it would be meant as a follow-up to this Banjo-Kazooie platformer. So if this game being in pre-production, it's meant to continue this momentum of this resurgence of this character and IP. Because like with the original Diddy Kong Racing, Banjo was a part of the roster. And so maybe this racer doesn't even include Diddy Kong, but it's also possible that Diddy Kong could be included, maybe at least in the Nintendo version. I think it's interesting to point out right now that Diddy Kong has not been seen in Donkey Kong Bonanza yet. Diddy Kong has also not been seen in Mario Kart World yet. And it might be the case that Nintendo has a certain plan for Diddy Kong later down the road. Personally, I assume that Diddy Kong is going to actually be in Donkey Kong Bonanza. He's just going to show up a little bit later on into the game. There are so many different Kongs and references to Donkey Kong history, including the country games. I really doubt that Diddy Kong is not in that game in some form. In Mario Kart World, I could see Diddy Kong, if not being an unlockable, some sort of DLC update at some point or another. But as I've pointed out multiple times, this idea of Microsoft, Playtonic Games, and/or Nintendo coming together to work on some sort of new racing game involving Banjo-Kazooie that might be somewhat of a spiritual successor to Diddy Kong Racing may seem a little unlikely. Perhaps that's not the game in pre-production. Especially because if Nintendo and Microsoft are working together, why would Kev Bayless, who currently works at Playtonic Games, know about it? Maybe he heard something, maybe he's involved, but it does seem unlikely. And when I say unlikely, I mean that Microsoft would be involved with a Diddy Kong Racing project. The fact that Kev Bayless is winking at this idea of a Diddy Kong Racing sequel, it might be hinting at something, it just wouldn't be having to do with Microsoft. It's either A, that Nintendo and Playtonic Games might be working together on a Diddy Kong Racing, or B, Playtonic Games has a spiritual successor in mind that doesn't actually involve the Diddy Kong character. So then I wonder, what could be the game in pre-production that would be targeted at Nintendo users that wouldn't be something like Banjo-Kazooie because that's seemingly already in the works, or Diddy Kong Racing because that seems too far-fetched? Well, let's remind ourselves that Microsoft does have access to all of the Rare IP, and maybe they'll go back to one they haven't gone back to in a long time, because now they're thinking about the relationship with Nintendo, and perhaps they can take advantage of that to find more success. They make it for both Xbox users and Nintendo users. And there's a game, a series that we haven't seen in a very long time, that might be able to find a lot of success on both platforms. And I think that could be the return of Jet Force Gemini. Hear me out here. Jet Force Gemini, we haven't seen any new installments of since the original release back on Nintendo 64. And this is a game that's a sci-fi shooter. It's something that a lot of people could see being successful on the Xbox platform, because that's a lot of what they've been known for over the years. But also, given its history with Nintendo, it could find success there as well. And so by making this game geared towards both platforms, they're giving themselves more opportunity to find success, right? That's why a lot of companies like to put out their games on multiple platforms. That's more places where they can sell copies. And so a Jet Force Gemini being in pre-production, I think, makes a lot of sense. Especially now that we've seen the capabilities of the Nintendo Switch 2. From a power perspective, the Switch 2 can run games that an Xbox Series S can run, essentially. So Microsoft could be making a Jet Force Gemini in theory for both platforms at the same time, then of course they can have a higher fidelity version for Xbox Series X. But they can still have a solid looking version for Switch 2 and thanks to the mouse controls of Switch 2, which work really well for a lot of shooters, they can implement that as well, and that would be very exciting for Nintendo fans. And to go a step further here, Switch 2 also has game chat, which helps to further modernize the console. Microsoft has more options in terms of what games they can make that would work really well on Switch 2, because a lot of their games they might make with the basic features the Xbox has, like having voice chat, so they can make a Jet Force Gemini game where it could be an online cooperative game with your different teammates, and that would work just fine on Switch 2. But what do you all think? What do you make of this triple-pronged rumor? What do you make of this idea of something being in the works that might be somewhat of a spiritual successor to Diddy Kong Racing, even if it's not related to these Microsoft projects? What do you make of maybe Banjo-Kazooie making a comeback, coming out for not just Xbox but also Switch 2 at the same time, and maybe something else being in pre-production that could be exciting to us Nintendo fans? I think maybe a Jet Force Gemini, but perhaps something else. Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.